So say you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. I'm coming at you today with something a bit new. We're going to talk about spirit science, and their weird ideas about aliens and conspiracy theories. Basically, I just need a break from nothing but young Earth creationism, and decided to open myself up to some new kinds of pseudoscience. And nothing says pseudoscience quite like the guy who said that Jews are from space, and the Egyptian god Thoth was a real guy who was also 30 feet tall, and omnipotent, but somehow still sucked at saving humanity. That guy is Jordan, the owner and operator of Spirit Science, so let's see what he has to say about aliens.
The subject of extraterrestrials has mystified humanity for countless generations.
Well, I wouldn't quite say countless generations. The idea that there were other worlds than Earth that were like it in ways that could support ordinary life really traced back to the origin of heliocentrism, which demoted Earth from being the center of the universe to just one more orb among potentially countless others. Before that, there were ideas that there were inhabitants of celestial bodies, but they were more gods, angels, etc., than they were aliens in the sense of biological but not supernatural entities from other planets. So the modern conception of extraterrestrials really only goes back about 400 years, not exactly countless generations.
The question of, are we alone in the universe, has inspired us to push forward and advance as a species in the search for life in the great beyond.
This is quite true. One of the biggest motives for sending so many probes to Mars is to check for signs of ancient life there. Further, that is one of the biggest reasons that we are learning to figure out the atmospheres of exoplanets, and looking into the subsurface oceans of bodies like Europa. Humans want to find life. We want to know if Earth is just a fluke in the universe, or if life is common, or perhaps it's something in between.
But to this day, judging by the way people generally treat the subject, it would appear that we have yet to make any form of substantial contact. Yet.
Yes, because there is no verifiable contact that is unambiguously attributable to extraterrestrial life. And on top of that, there are reasons to think that even if intelligent extraterrestrials exist, they are most likely not visiting Earth. Alien encounters are kind of like Bigfoot encounters. Sure, there is hard to explain evidence out there, but ultimately what we need to confirm either is a living or deceased specimen available to scientific scrutiny. Until then, the parsimonious answer to both the Bigfoot and the alien question is that they do not exist, or at least not currently in the places they are claimed to exist.
The awareness of a deeper truth, that something is being hidden from us, is regularly being leaked to this day.
There is no doubt that the governments of the world keep secrets. Just the fact that they declassify things is sufficient to demonstrate that. But the problem is that if you want to say that the government is covering up a particular thing, you have some work cut out for you. First, it's easier if there are precedents in history. For example, there is evidence that even after the US government found out that the explosion on board the USS Maine in 1898 was the result of improperly stored gunpowder and not an attack by the Spanish, that they kept this hidden from the public to keep enthusiasm for the Spanish-American War going. So if you wanted to suggest that an explosion at a munitions storage dump at, say, an American base in Iraq were actually just an accident, and not the result of an attack by local insurgents, that would at least be reasonable, as there is precedent. But we don't have any confirmed instances of the government covering up extraterrestrials per se, although we do have confirmed instances of them investigating the same. So to jump from the government is covering up their investigations of the UFO phenomenon, to the US government is covering up their actual knowledge of aliens, you need to first show that there are aliens beyond any reasonable doubt, then you need to show that the government knows about it, then that they are actively covering up that knowledge. Simply claiming we can't know because there's a conspiracy is unfalsifiable conjecture. It just adds to the burden of proof that aliens are here, that there is also a conspiracy.
Let's start with some basics, which would be UFOs, which we all know stands for Unidentified Flying Objects, or as they're starting to be called today, UAVs, Unidentified Aerial Vehicles.
This is a minor point, but I really haven't heard the term UAV used much outside ufology circles. I think the term UFO was going to persist in the general public for quite a while.
It was shortly after the 2 atomic bombs went off during World War II that UFO sightings spiked around the world. Hundreds of reports of UFOs began to emerge in the decade that followed the incident.
Interestingly, so do anxieties about the potential harm of new technologies. It's probably not a coincidence that as the fears of atomic annihilation were rising and the first popular science fiction movies were coming out, that people started considering that things in the sky might be aliens, when before they might not have jumped to that conclusion. You could say, as some sci-fi films have, such as The Day the Earth Stood Still, that the increase in sightings was due to aliens being more interested in Earth because Earth's nuclear weapons pose some threat to the wider universe. But the problem is that on a galactic scale, nuclear weapons are just not really a big deal. Stars routinely explode with orders of magnitude more energy, and Earth nuclear weapons are a long way off from being able to reach Mars or Venus, never mind having any realistic chance of being deployed against beings in another star system. From the point of view of any non-terrestrial civilization, Earth's current nuclear arsenal is just about as threatening as a slingshot.
And it was in 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico, that things got really interesting. Reports of a UFO crash landing in the shape of a flying disc inspired tremendous interest in possible alien activity as the US military quickly quarantined and cleaned up the site, claiming it was simply a weather balloon.
The Roswell incident is certainly interesting, and you won't find me arguing that the weather balloon story actually makes much sense. For one thing, there's no reason for the military to so thoroughly clamp down on information about a weather balloon. There are also very strange eyewitness accounts from the incident, but eyewitness accounts are not generally very reliable unless they can be corroborated, and these generally can't. And further, there are more parsimonious explanations for the military's actions surrounding the Roswell incident. A simple option is that rather than a weather balloon, the military was testing spy balloon technology and covering the whole thing up so as not to give out information on their intelligence gathering techniques. This has the advantage that the military routinely classifies the technology they use, as I have seen firsthand working in the nuclear power arm of the United States Navy. And further, it explains the lack of any openness by the US Army and their insistence that the object was just a weather balloon, which is a fairly generic cover story. So when faced with only shaky evidence to the contrary, and no prior verifiable alien encounters, the idea that the military was covering up spy tech is far more plausible than that it was actually a crash by aliens.
This was really the beginning, and today, thanks to modern technology, especially cell phones, we have access to thousands, if not tens of thousands, of seemingly unexplainable UFO sightings from around the world.
A couple things. First, that just looks like planes on a humid day doing aerial acrobatics. You can see fairly ordinary contrails, and they aren't moving in some inexplicable way. And of course, it's cloudy, so we know that contrails would persist in that condition when they might not exist at all in drier conditions. Second, if we can't currently explain something, that doesn't make it aliens. That's the same argument as the God of the Gaps. You just put in aliens instead of God. Unexplained means just that. It's not evidence of aliens. It's not evidence of gods. It's not evidence of dragons. It just means that an explanation is not currently forthcoming. I am 100% willing to acknowledge that things are spotted in the sky that do not have readily available explanations. But that doesn't mean we can just insert our favorite idea. I would love for it to be aliens, but that's not sufficient for me to jump to that conclusion.
My own personal favorite is the Dome of the Rock incident from 2011, where several independent people caught footage of a bright, glowing, and oscillating orb that descended over the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. After hovering over the sacred temple for several moments, it shot upwards with tremendous speed, disappearing into the sky.
This might be Jordan's favorite UFO sighting, but it's also a fake. There are a number of problems with this. First among them is that the only source we have for this incident is the footage we just saw. We don't have any other footage of it. We don't have any eyewitnesses. There are no reports of it at all until after the footage was anonymously posted online. The Dome of the Rock is in Jerusalem, a sacred city to Jews and Christians, and to a lesser but still significant extent, to Muslims. The building itself is a holy site for Islam, said to be the site of Muhammad's ascension into heaven after being carried to Jerusalem on the back of a winged, human-faced horse. It is built on the site of Herod's temple, which is significant to the religious history and practice of Jews as well as the religious history of Christians. It is one of the most visited sites in the world and is heavily photographed. That such a significant event was not filmed more than once and only reported by a single anonymous person beggars belief. Further, nothing in the footage would be particularly hard to fake with basic special effects. In fact, what you've been watching is just more fake footage. It's pretty easy to do.
In more recent times, a video that was leaked several years ago was released by none other than the Pentagon, featuring 3 separate accounts of US military pilots attempting to track and follow incredibly fast-moving aerial ships, without any clue as to what they were.
Exactly. Without any clue as to what they were. That's not evidence of aliens. In fact, if it were, it would rather contradict the earlier claim that the US government is covering up the aliens. In reality, a better explanation for this footage is just that a bird is being tracked by onboard hardware from a fast-moving fighter jet. The parallax from the moving background makes the subject look faster than it is, and the resolution is too low to make out any real details.
Along with curious phenomena like these, we also have a long list of ex-military officials who have either claimed to have seen or even had some level of interaction with these crafts, identifying that not only are they real, but they have no idea what they are.
Eyewitness testimony is reason to look into something, but from a scientific point of view, it's really not very good evidence. If science is going to take an idea seriously, you need more than just fallible humans claiming they saw a thing. We need actual verifiable physical evidence of the thing that cannot reasonably be explained by known phenomena and processes.
One particular interesting subject in this discussion is the work of Robert Dean, a retired command sergeant major who, after that job, became a ufologist and had been very public about his experiences with UFOs and ETs up until his passing away in 2018.
Robert Dean was indeed a retired soldier in the United States Army. He claims to have held a cosmic top-secret clearance, which is the highest level of the 4 levels of NATO classification. One big problem with his testimony, though, is that the document he claimed to have seen has never been heard of by anyone else willing to come forward, and given that the United States has a now open history of such investigations, such as Project Blue Book, this alleged document, the assessment, is dubious. Further, it is not as if Robert Dean did not have anything to gain from making false and impossible to check on claims. He gained fame and notoriety in the ufology community, and became a bit of a celebrity within that sphere.
At one point, he gave a presentation, the full thing of which you can find available on YouTube, accounting many of the things that he saw in the military and NASA.
I can't find any reason to think Robert Dean was ever in NASA. Further, most of the military members who do end up working for NASA are pilots and therefore officers, since as a rule, only officers are pilots in the United States military. Robert Dean was enlisted, retiring with the rank of Command Sergeant Major, that is, E9, the highest pay grade in the enlisted ranks of the United States military. This is about what you'd expect for someone who retired after 28 years of enlisted service.
The most interesting of which being the story of what happened during the real moon landing.
Oh, you guys haven't heard that there's an even deeper conspiracy than just that NASA faked the Apollo 11 moon landing? Yeah, in this one, an earlier Apollo mission actually landed on the moon in a top-secret mission that the public didn't know about. Then the Apollo 11 landing was faked for TV.
Now, many people today believe that the moon landing itself is a conspiracy, that it was faked because of certain things that stand out about the moon landing that don't make sense, such as why the crosshairs of a camera are appearing behind a particular object on the screen, or the strange objects in the reflection of the astronaut's visor.
So my big question is, why do the retroreflectors left on the moon by the Apollo missions work? They are used to calculate with extreme precision the distance to the moon. They were put there by astronauts and are routinely used by students and professionals nearly every day. Whatever else may be going on, the retroreflectors are there. Further, it would be nearly impossible with 60s technology to fake a moon landing that was so accurate to what being on the real moon would be like. Even in 2009, the film Moon failed utterly at being even close to realistic, despite much better technology.
But what Robert Dean has described was that there was actually a real moon landing. But what happened was that upon arriving at the moon, what the astronauts found was that it was populated.
The moon was populated, the desolate rock from which we have never detected a hint of artificiality that humans didn't themselves put up there. And you have to remember that the moon is a favorite of amateur astronomers the world over. It is the best known and most photographed body in existence besides Earth. We have hyper-detailed maps of the whole thing, and yet still no verifiable signs of extraterrestrial habitation on Luna.
There were, according to him, little alien people walking all over the place, ships flying through the, well, I'd call it air, but I guess they don't have oxygen up there, do they?
Well, first, they don't have a whole lot more than just oxygen. And even if it has no oxygen, but lots of carbon dioxide and or nitrogen as a gas, I'd still call that air. What the moon has is an exosphere, which is a very tenuous envelope of atoms and molecules that move ballistically rather than fluidly. So there is no wind, you can't pump it, but there is something above the surface of the moon. Second, it's great that some guy said a thing, but we need actual physical evidence. We don't even have blurry photos like we do for Bigfoot. Spaceships and little green men walking around need an infrastructure, and to date neither the ships, the base, nor any other indication of the presence of aliens on the moon has been found by anyone willing to actually demonstrate their findings in a scientific manner.
This was such a shock to the astronauts that after their visit they returned back with 40 rolls of film of what they saw, and NASA supposedly destroyed it.
Oh, well, that was wonderful. Good time was had by all. I'm pooped.
Yes, I should be. Good Lord, what is happening in there?
40 reels of alien pictures? 40 reels of alien pictures?
At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen.
Yes.
May I see it?
No.
The thinking seems to be that the revelation of this truth was so out there that NASA buried the truth because of what would happen to the world if this was to get out.
Would it really be that much more of a shock than when the world realized that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe? Or that it wasn't even the solar system? I don't actually know the answer to that question, but society has gone through revelations about the place of the world in the wider cosmos more than once, and emerged from it pretty well. In fact, it might very much be that such knowledge would serve to unite humanity in their shared interest as a species.
Now, I'm not saying that I'm in support of hiding the truth, but at the same time, think of how many religious beliefs would be shattered from this truth.
Not many, I think. In 2014, Pope Francis of the Roman Catholic Church said that if aliens existed, he would be open to them becoming Christians and would allow them to be baptized into the Roman Catholic Church. Most religions, I think, could adapt well, since nothing about the existence of aliens really contradicts the existence of creator deities, nor does it likely falsify any of the stories about such deities' acts here on Earth. Sure, it might be bad news for young Earth creationism and other such religious ideas, but those ones are already way past salvaging anyway. Then again, given the persistence of things like creationism in the face of evidence we already have, perhaps even the religions that would be threatened by intelligent alien life would end up persisting just fine.
How much chaos would be caused if, all of a sudden, our entire global paradigm was to change in an instant?
Well, assuming the revelation of alien life didn't come in the form of an invasion, I'm not really sure what kind of chaos, if any, would result.
You may be familiar with a man named Bob Lazar, one of, if not the first, to come forward with inside leaks about the secret government UFO programs.
I am, in fact, familiar with Bob Lazar, the man who says things that make no sense in terms of science and who backs this up with, as far as I know, an unsubstantiated claim to have worked near Area 51. Area 51, of course, being a testing ground for experimental, but very human aircraft.
He claimed to have been hired in the late 1980s to reverse engineer purported extraterrestrial technology at what he described was a secret site called S4, a site similar to, and rather close to, Area 51.
Which is great, except there is no evidence that he actually worked at S4, Area 51, or even Los Alamos, where he also claimed to work.
He described that he had access to a recovered UFO ship and for several years was attempting to discover the secrets of how it worked.
Then I'm sure what we're about to hear will make lots of sense and not at all be just total gibberish.
Lazar claimed that the propulsion of the studied vehicle was fueled by the chemical element with the atomic number 115, known today as moscovium, or E-115, which at the time was named unumpentium, since it hadn't been created yet. However, it was first synthesized in 2003 by a joint team of Russian and American scientists for real.
Yes, it was, but keep in mind that its most stable form still has a half-life of 0.65 seconds. That means if you had a full metric ton of it, after 1 minute, you would have about 2 zeptograms. That's a decimal point with 20 zeros after it, followed by a 2 grams. Which is to say, if you had a solid ton of nothing but moscovium-290, after a minute you would end up with approximately 5 atoms of the stuff left. I probably don't have to tell you that 5 atoms isn't really enough to do anything with.
He said that the propulsion system relied on a stable isotope of E-115.
No stable isotope of moscovium does or can exist, because the weak nuclear force simply cannot hold on to giant atoms like that. Lead-208 is about as big as a stable atom can get, and that's 82 protons and 126 neutrons. Moscovium has 115 protons by definition, and even its most stable isotope as stated, moscovium-290, has 175 neutrons. There is simply no way for an atomic nucleus that big to stay stable with any version of our understanding of physics. And remember, it's not like scientists haven't looked into it. Granted, they hadn't when Bob was making these claims, but they have now, and had before this video was made.
Which supposedly generated a gravity wave after being excited by livermorium, element 116, during proton bombardment.
Livermorium has the same problem, but almost 10 times worse. The half-life of the most stable isotope of livermorium is only 60 milliseconds, which is 9 1/3 times shorter than that of moscovium-290. So you can't really do anything with these elements because they just don't exist long enough. They almost immediately break apart, as do all the synthetic elements. There's a reason we don't find them outside of laboratories, because in nature they simply couldn't persist even if they were made.
He argued that the decay products brought about by the reaction between the two elements would include gravitons, a hypothetical quantum particle that is thought to be responsible for gravity.
Gravitons are a hypothetical boson with a spin of 2 and no mass. If they exist, they would be the force carrier for gravity. That is, they would be to gravity what photons are to light and what gluons are to the strong nuclear force. But as is, no one has found any way to even hypothetically make them. And they may not exist. It is still an open question as to whether the theory of quantum gravity will result with a force of gravity with a force-carrying graviton, or if it will be more in line with relativity, in which gravity is not so much a force, but a shift in the local coordinate system that manifests locally as an apparent force. Either way, bombarding moscovium and livermorium with protons will not produce gravitons. It will just produce nuclear fission in the nuclei in question, and so you'll lose your moscovium and livermorium even faster than the blistering pace you were already losing them at. And this isn't some contentious thing. This is the basis of how nuclear reactors work. You shoot protons at big nuclei, and when they are absorbed into said nuclei, the nuclei become unstable and burst apart.
In his new Netflix documentary, he used the analogy that the craft is kind of like a bowling ball. If you were to put a ball onto a piece of fabric or your bedsheet, and then proceeded to push down on the areas around it, the bowling ball would fall forward into the bends and gaps that you create around it. In this way, the craft would kind of just fall through space by distorting space-time around it, like in a continuous rolling motion.
This is a form of reactionless propulsion, and it's not strictly speaking impossible. This is essentially a warp drive. You just have to be able to harness an amount of power that would rival the total output of the sun, and I mean that literally. However, it is the case that in August of 2020, Eric W. Lenz at the Astrophysics Institute of a university in a German city I'm not going to try to pronounce, did manage to find a solution for Einstein's field equations that would result in a sublight warp bubble. Of course, that is still not helping us with faster-than-light travel, which is an important part of having biological aliens visiting Earth.
This is what allowed the vehicle to fly and to evade visual detection by bending light around it.
So, engines that couldn't last more than a second, that wouldn't have any fancy gravitational effects as described, also cloak the ships. Yeah, that checks out. And Bob Lazar is totally not just Looney Tunes crazy.
According to intel that he received while at S4, the ship, which was one of 9 that the military had access to, was originally from the twin binary star system called Zeta Reticuli.
Well, I would like to say that Zeta Reticuli is neither the best nor worst choice for putting some aliens. For one thing, we have never had any indications that the system is home to intelligent life. It's not quite 40 light years away, so if there were any broadband transmissions going on from aliens, we should be able to detect them, but we haven't. Also, there are no known exoplanets, and with the stars in Zeta Reticuli being so close, that means there's a fair chance that any that may exist there are probably cold, distant, small rocks. On the other hand, as stars go, the 2 members of the Zeta Reticuli binary are fairly sun-like, and could at least hypothetically support Earth-like life.
And had belonged to the Greys, which are the most common visual of aliens that we generally see today when you think of what an alien might look like. We even have an emoji for it.
So the Greys are probably the least convincing form of alien life. They're just weird humans. Further, they were largely the product of pop culture, with similar depictions appearing in film before they were reported by supposed abductees. And again, like Bigfoot and El Chupacabras, without a specimen, there's really no reason to think they exist.
This was especially challenging because supposedly the ship was entirely interconnected. There weren't really any moving parts. It seemed to be one singular solid object. The seat and floor and panels and walls were all one singular material, with no sharp edges anywhere, an entirely different kind of machine than anything we're used to today.
The problem with that is that it essentially means that the alien craft defies the laws of physics as we know them. Now, that's not necessarily impossible. Our understanding of physics has, and I'm sure will again, change in light of evidence that things don't work the way we thought they did. However, what it also means is that you're just multiplying the things that make the whole story incredible, in the strict sense, i.e., not credible. Really, other than the fact that without moving parts, you really don't have a machine that does things, that's all I have to say. Making this more ridiculous doesn't make it more likely to be true.
Now, after Lazar came out publicly about this, his life fell apart. Many people quickly looked into his life and found that he seemingly never had any of the education degrees that he claimed to have had.
Where else have I seen someone like that?
My name is Kent Hovind. I taught high school science for 15 years, and now for 16 years I've been an evangelist doing seminars on creation, evolution, and dinosaurs.
Yet, upon deeper investigation, documents stored away in his old university proved that he was telling the truth.
Nope, the only documentation I can find is that Bob Lazar attended but may not have graduated from Pierce Junior College in Los Angeles. I'm quite open to being shown more documentation, though, indicating that he actually has the academic and work background he claims. If you have them, send them along and I'll issue an apology and retraction.
Bob explained that after he came out publicly, he received a phone call from his ex-employers who said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now that you've done this?"
He got a Netflix documentary, so it seems like what his employers were going to do is absolutely nothing.
And for many years, Bob suffered as much of his past was erased, and he was made to look like a fool in front of the masses.
Okay, but that wasn't by NASA or the Air Force or the CIA. It was because he went and did and said stupid things on national TV and on the internet. You don't get to blame a nefarious Illuminati Mason reptoid globe Earth conspiracy for making a fool of yourself in public.
And this brings us to Dr. Stephen Greer, who founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or CSETI, in 1990 to create a diplomatic and research-based initiative to contact extraterrestrial civilizations, along with the Disclosure Project in 1993, a research project devoted to disclosing to the public information that the government and military supposedly have had regarding the existence of UFOs and ETs. The organization claims to have over 3,000 confirmed reports of UFO sightings by pilots.
That's hardly surprising. Technically, anything spotted in the air that cannot be identified is a UFO, even if, in reality, it's a bird, a meteor, another plane, a balloon, etc. The sky is big, and humans are bad at identifying objects in unusual environments, so there's no reason to think there wouldn't be a lot of UFO sightings, regardless of whether or not extraterrestrials are visiting Earth.
And over 4,000 proofs of what they describe as landing traces, evidence of UFOs landing on the Earth and leaving behind a sort of electromagnetic signature.
Wind and lightning, as well as fungi and fires, can all leave behind circular marks on the ground and in plant life. A dust devil touching down, a lightning strike, a fire that spreads evenly through a manicured area of plants, and the creeping mycelium of a mushroom patch all make seemingly strange round patterns. And of course, as is the theme of this series, even if you ruled out all of those, it doesn't make it aliens. And I also doubt that they have ruled them all out. The strange electromagnetic readings are claimed in relations to things like crop circles. Unfortunately, they can't be replicated when non-ufologists investigate. Weird, isn't it?
If we pair this with what Bob Lazar said, it's entirely possible these ships could be bending light, entirely invisible to us, though perhaps not high-level military scanners.
Wait, what does that have to do with landing marks? Do these ships therefore not leave behind marks? And if so, why did you bring up the circular marks? If they do leave marks, then what's the point of saying that they're invisible?
Dr. Greer also appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast many years ago and explained some very interesting things. What he received from a collection of over 30 documents from the NRO, NSA, CIA, FBI, and presidential briefings was that the way that these ships work and the way these ETs understand the universe is leagues beyond our own.
Why are all these alphabet soup agencies giving some engineer at Area 51 all this documentation? Look, I've had security clearance. Even with a security clearance of secret, it didn't mean I was allowed to just look up whatever secret documents I wanted. All classified information is on a need-to-know basis, and regardless of your clearance, if you don't need to know the information, you don't get access. So why is some guy working on propulsion being given papers on alien philosophy and broad aspects of how the ship works? Especially when, as he claimed, that he wasn't even allowed to talk to people working on other aspects of the craft. This part of the story makes no sense even internally.
What he described was that while today we believe that light is the fastest thing in the universe,
Well, there are some hypotheses that would allow for faster-than-light particles called tachyons, but it's not clear that any of those have any merit, and so tachyons probably are not a thing.
this is only a barrier, and on the other side of the speed of light are laws that are governed by some sort of super consciousness.
The speed of light is basically the speed of causality. Going past it would result in absurdities, such as effects which precede causes, etc. And further, it's not simply a barrier. According to relativity, the amount of energy needed to accelerate an object to a higher speed increases exponentially as you get close to the speed of light, and the amount of energy it would take to get any mass up to the speed of light is infinite. And since you can't really have more energy than that, it presents a serious problem for the idea of going faster. Further, what is this consciousness and what evidence of there is it? Could this be true? Sure, but Bob Lazar really offers no evidence of it.
It is from this higher awareness that interdimensional travel becomes possible, and you can move throughout the universe nearly instantaneously.
This is just word salad. Higher consciousness beyond the light barrier allows interdimensional travel? What is this consciousness? What does it mean to travel faster than causality? What are the dimensions we could supposedly travel to?
Without worrying about the speed of light, which is simply too slow to travel at if you're going from solar system to solar system, or especially across the galaxy, or even between galaxies.
Which is why we need more than elements with known properties that like to decay to nothing in a minute and word salad if we're going to take seriously the proposition of interstellar visitors.
This is incredibly important to us because it's relative to the idea that consciousness and conscious thought actively steers the field of reality that creates the experiences that we have.
This is Jordan explaining his crazy idea that all the things in your life, good or bad, are the result of your good or bad thoughts. Of course, it's not clear to me why, say, a starving child with malaria in the Congo has such bad thoughts compared to a Karen in the USA with a comfortable life. But hey, I guess those starving kids must just be really big jerks according to Jordan.
One thing that Dr. Greer explained was that the significance of alien life to us isn't really all about ETs at all, but about technology. The very instant that it became available would completely transform life on Earth forever.
Actually, I agree with Jordan here. Look at how radically the world changed in the past 100 years. I'm making this in the year 2021. Look back at 1921. At that point, the closest thing we had to computers were giant mechanical cogwork boxes that could only do a single type of calculation, such as artillery range finding or simple addition and subtraction. Now we have semiconducting computers with more computational power than you need to get to Mars in each of our pockets. Presumably, aliens who can get to Earth would be far more advanced than us, and so getting a hold of their technology would certainly change our day-to-day life far more than just the change between 1921 and 2021.
Imagine suddenly being able to travel to distant planets or explore the universe.
It would be pretty cool, but unfortunately, not only is there currently no viable option that would even physically allow for that, it would violate causality, and for that reason alone, is probably impossible. As much as it sucks, chances are that we are stuck traveling below the speed of light and always will be, and so is everyone else in the universe, aliens included.
This has tremendous implications to it, and may even be part of the reasoning for keeping the technology hidden for now. The question arises, is this technology hidden so that only the secret rulers of the world can have it? Or is it because humanity is not yet ready to inherit such a gift?
Well, you have not come even close to establishing that such technology exists to be hidden from us in the first place. You know, the Illuminati and the Masons and the Lizard People all live in the same world we do. They have to contend with the same air pollution, water pollution, food availability, communications networks, etc. that we all do. So there's only so much benefit to be gained by keeping back technology. Because the global economy is so interconnected, anything that greatly improves its efficiency or its cleanliness, etc., will tend to raise the overall standard of living on the globe. Granted, some people will still end up starving, but there's a reason that as global trade and economic development have increased, that both the proportion of the human population and the absolute number of humans who are at or below the absolute poverty line is shrinking. Meanwhile, the people who are above the poverty line are overall either not falling below it or are going farther above it. And this is especially true for the ultra-wealthy. Now, this isn't time for a discussion about wealth distribution or the value of allowing capital accumulation versus equity in economic outcome. But the point I'm making is that the elites of the world would almost certainly be better off if they shared what superior tech they have, or at least if they shared much of it. So not only does this conspiracy have no evidence, it doesn't really make sense. Remember, one of the best ways to figure out if a conspiracy even makes sense is to ask quo bono, or who benefits. If the answer is ultimately no one, then it's probably not a real conspiracy.
One final piece in the ET and UFO conspiracy is the concept of the hoaxed alien attack. This comes from the late Dr. Werner von Braun, the top Nazi scientist of Hitler's army who, after World War II, came to the United States to work for the US government. Funny how that happens.
No, it's not funny at all. After the Second World War, the United States had a whole project called Operation Paperclip for recruiting members of the now defunct National Socialist regime in Germany for use in US government research and development. This is because, to some degree out of necessity, the National Socialist German Workers' Party needed to innovate in technology and medicine fast if they stood even a slim chance of winning a war in which nearly the entire world opposed them. As a result, they were pioneers in many fields of science, albeit advancing in many areas through ethically aberrant methods. One of these fields was rocketry, in which they developed some of the first reliable rocket-propelled projectiles, as well as some of the first rocket-propelled crewed vehicles. There is no surprise, then, that after the war, the United States, which was concerned with technological supremacy over their former ally and new rival, the USSR, would recruit Wernher von Braun.
And on his deathbed, he theorized that after a war with the Middle East, one day there would be a hoaxed alien attack, which was a part of the secret plan to weaponize space and control the world.
I don't actually know if this bit is true, but I don't really feel the need to contest it. If he did think this, I'm not sure what benefit there is to the idea that aliens are really visiting Earth.
He actually urged Dr. Rosen, his secretary, to thwart this plan above all else, because if it were to come to pass, and space was weaponized, whoever controlled these powers would have complete and supreme control over everyone, and the world would fall under the complete control of the oppressors.
See, that's why harping on von Braun's former time with the National Socialists is boring. It doesn't really define his whole life. He was not exactly an enthusiastic supporter of the regime, and became ever less so after his emigration from Germany. Of course, this brings up an ethical question anyway, one that Jordan isn't going to bother tackling, so I'll briefly discuss it. Throughout history, many scientific discoveries were made in deeply unethical ways. Whether it was grave robbing or potentially even murder to get cadavers for anatomy studies, or infecting poor children with cowpox without consent to develop the smallpox vaccine, or what we learned about syphilis from secretly infecting scores of African American men and not treating them under the pretense of giving them free medical care from the staff at an all-black college, or the various experiments conducted on concentration camp victims in Germany during World War II. What do we do with such knowledge? In fact, even Star Trek tackled this question in the episode Nothing Human, Season 5, Episode 8 of Star Trek Voyager, in which a holographic facsimile of a doctor who conducted unethical experiments during an occupation is created to help save the life of a crew member. To me, the answer is twofold. We must do whatever we can to ensure that current and future research, especially medical research, is done as ethically as possible. There is no excuse for cutting corners when it comes to the informed consent, health, and lives of human participants in clinical trials. On the other hand, I do think that if research was done unethically, that the knowledge gained there should still be used. The suffering has already happened, and ignoring the knowledge will neither lessen it, make up for it, nor erase it. The only thing ignoring such information can do is let others suffer or fail to reach their potential now. So sure, von Braun's work on the V2 rocket cost many innocent people their lives, but that doesn't mean that the knowledge gained by it about things like rocket guidance and design should be ignored, setting NASA back decades.
Now, the subject of ETs does not end there, however, because there is also the reptilian conspiracy.
Man, we are hitting every single one of the conspiracies. I should have made a bingo card for this.
Most famously brought to the public attention by the British conspiracy theorist David Icke.
In case you don't know, Icke has also claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus and went through a so-called turquoise phase, in which he only wore turquoise clothing because he said it was a conduit for positive energy. He has also been promoting the completely spurious claim that 5G networks are causing COVID-19, never mind that places with and without 5G networks don't show any correlation in caseload, or that there's literally no way for low-intensity microwaves, such as those used by 5G, to create viruses or do anything other than slightly warm your body. Not that any of this makes Icke wrong about lizard people, he's just wrong about that too. But I wanted to give everyone a bit of background on who we're dealing with here.
It's become one of the most infamous and popular conspiracy theories ever, sparking numerous parodies and commentaries in the media and TV shows.
Yeah, because it's a ludicrous idea that is based on the ravings of a lunatic, and on people not knowing how video compression works.
To put it simply, Icke believes that an interdimensional race of reptilian entities known as Archons have hijacked the Earth and are stopping humanity from realizing our true potential.
Saying that David Icke believes something is not evidence of that thing. While I know that it's technically logically fallacious, it's actually reason for me to suspect that the thing is not true. But let's find out if Jordan gives us a reason to believe that the Archons are real, beyond just that some confirmed crazy man believes it.
He has argued that these Archons are the same beings mentioned in many Gnostic texts, that have identified themselves as demons and rulers of the 7 planets in various traditions.
So in Gnostic texts, the archons are similar to the gods of, say, Greco-Roman or Norse polytheism. They're in charge of aspects of the physical world, and themselves are emanations from the supreme god who is beyond physical reality, and is actually opposed to its existence. They are identified in some cases with demons in their traditional Greek sense of the word, not the way Christians think about it. In the ancient Greek world, a demon was any lesser spirit. Sometimes they were helpful, sometimes harmful, but it was thought that various spells could entice them to act on behalf of people, and that they inspired people to in turn perform acts. For example, they could be the muse of a poet, a tempter to evil, a servant sent to make someone fall in love with a spellcaster, etc. Jordan here either doesn't know this religious history, or he is simply choosing to link Gnostic archons to demons as they are understood in the modern Judeo-Christian world in order to port over those negative ideas to the Gnostic archons and then to the reptoids.
Mostly having the ultimate goal of preventing souls from leaving the material realm.
No, that wasn't really the goal generally of archons in Gnosticism, although it could be for some demons, but sure, whatever.
He claims that because of this, they have gone by many names throughout history, including the Anunnaki from Sumerian myth.
The Anunnaki are a group of lesser deities in Mesopotamian mythology descended from Anu, one of the main gods in Mesopotamia, as the name literally means sons of Anu. They have nothing to do with spaceships, reptilians, or keeping souls in the material world.
And the Watchers and Nephilim from the Book of Enoch.
These are angels and their descendants who have nothing to do with spaceships, reptilians, or keeping souls in the material world.
He argues that human sacrifice to the gods in the ancient world was actually for the reptilians' benefit, especially the sacrifice of children, because he tells us that at the moment of death by sacrifice, a form of adrenaline surges through the body, accumulating at the base of the brain, and is apparently more potent in children, something that is today reminiscent of adrenochrome.
Did anyone have adrenochrome on their conspiracy bingo cards? Okay, so adrenochrome is a real chemical. It's the oxidized form of adrenaline. But the thing is, you can just synthesize it. There's no easy way to extract it from an animal body, human or otherwise, and if advanced interdimensional aliens wanted it, it would be easier to just make it in a lab than to sacrifice animals and children. Further, the sacrifice of children was less common in the ancient world than we like to think. It was a common slander against political, religious, or military rivals that they engaged in various forms of human sacrifice. Further, we know what happened to at least animal sacrificial victims in the ancient past. They were generally eaten, not by the gods, but by the priests and those who had provided the sacrifice. So when is it that the alien lizard boys come and suck up the brainstem of sacrificial victims in contemporaneous accounts of sacrifice to gods? Oh, right. It's never. That never happens. Further, medical research on adrenochrome indicates that at least in humans, it has some hallucinatory effects, but guess what? That's what LSD is for. There is no reason at all for anyone to think that 1, adrenochrome is an effective recreational drug, or 2, that the best way to get it is to sacrifice animals or children.
Bringing it more into the modern day, he claims that a genetically modified human archon hybrid race of shape-shifting reptilians, known as the Babylonian Brotherhood, or the Illuminati or Freemasons to us today.
There is no reason to think that the Illuminati still exists. When they did exist, they were just a fraternal order of scholarly types. That's why the name means the Enlightened. The Masons are a quasi-religious fraternal order, and most of what they do is hanging out drinking beer and donating to charity. Seriously, it's not even hard to go become a Mason. Pretty much all you need to do is be an adult male human and ask nicely. Yes, they do have some weird rituals that involve, shall we say, idiosyncratic interpretations of Abrahamic theology, but most members don't actually believe any of that, and that is not per se a motive to control the world from behind the scenes. And no, there is no reason to think that Masons are reptiles. How would that even work with new members? Do they become reptiles after joining a lodge? One group of humans that I'd be happy to turn into reptoids, like me, is my patrons and channel members. So before we go on, let's take a moment to thank them. I want to take a little time to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or more. Bob Knob, Bent Hovend, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, Patrick Dennis, and Res Instance. YouTube is a very volatile platform, what with fraudulent copyright claims, demonetization, and the ever-decreasing share of ad revenue on the platform. It is very hard to rely on YouTube. My members and patrons help keep this channel going, and without them, the channel wouldn't exist. If you'd like to join my Patreon, the link is in the description, and if you'd like to become a channel member, that link is below the video. It's the join button here on YouTube. Either way, you'll get access to early videos, an exclusive Discord server, and if you pledge enough, 3D assets you can use in your own projects.
manipulate global events to keep humans in constant fear, so that the Archons can feed off of the negative energy that this creates.
But earlier, Jordan said that the aliens needed to harvest adrenochrome. That's an actual chemical. To take it, you would need to physically acquire it, and then ingest it. You can't simply absorb the admittedly limited effects of a chemical simply by being in a world where people have a lot of anxiety. So which is it? Were the reptoids harvesting neurochemicals from sacrificial victims, or is this some nebulous life force of anxiety that they need to feed off of?
Now, he has also claimed that the members of this secret elite are descended from reptilians coming from the Draco constellation. He stated that the reptilians come not only from another planet, but also another dimension.
But they are interdimensional, supposedly. So I guess the constellation Draco is in another dimension somehow. Does every constellation get its own dimension? That'd be strange, since constellations are just arbitrary and culturally dependent collections of stars. Not every culture has the same constellations. So did we just get it right by accident, that we got the constellation Draco, which is really a different dimension? While other cultures who split up those stars into separate constellations got it wrong? Was it just a giant coincidence? Who knows? Jordan sure doesn't, because he's never given a single second of critical thought to any of this.
The lower level of the fourth dimension, which he calls the astral plane.
So I guess this planet in Draco also exists in the astral plane. Better watch out for Githyanki and their red dragon buddies, as well as astral dreadnoughts. But what, do all planets also exist on the astral plane? What's it like there? How can anyone access it? What does it mean to be from there? Who knows? This whole aspect of the story simply serves to do two things. 1, connect it to Dungeons & Dragons, and 2, to keep it nicely unfalsifiable. Because anytime you point out that there's no evidence, despite the fact that we should expect some, you can just hand-wave it away with some vagary about the astral plane and the fourth dimension.
The one nearest to the physical world.
So the astral plane is closest to the physical world out of all the dimensions. I mean, okay, not sure what or if that means anything, but sure.
As of 2003, when his books originally brought this theory out, he said that the reptilian bloodlines include all American presidents, 3 British and 2 Canadian prime ministers, several Sumerian kings and Egyptian pharaohs, and a whole bunch of celebrities.
Okay, but again, David Icke saying something isn't evidence. Honestly, who cares? Anyone can say anything, that's not evidence. Look, watch this. Jordan from Spear and Science is actually a mole person from the planet Labrum 12 in the Virgo constellation, but he's also from the upper middle part of the 69th dimension. But it's not only him, it's also other major New Age woo peddlers like Deepak Chopra, nearly all TV psychics, and even Dr. Oz. See how easy that is? But guess what? It doesn't matter. The only reason anyone ever took Icke seriously is because before he became a crazy man who thought he was Jesus, he was a sports star.
Remember when that article went viral about how Justin Bieber supposedly turned into a giant reptile in front of everyone?
I do remember. And guess what? It was an artifact of video compression. You see, video feeds would take up way too much data if what was transmitted was actually a separate image for every frame. Instead, every so often the video is sampled for color information. Then information about how the color moves is recorded. The computer at the other end then moves the color around to interpolate between the sampled frames with actual color data. This isn't foolproof, and can cause noticeable artifacts, especially in high contrast areas. Guess which part of a human face has some of the highest contrast, and which humans pay the most attention to? That's right, it's the eyes, specifically the pupils and their surroundings. So when a video compression artifact arises in someone's face, there's a pretty good chance it'll be around their pupils and it will distort them, making them look misshapen. Or, if you are conspiracy-minded, reptilian. So it's up to the conspiracy theorists to explain why this isn't video compression artifacts, even though it's exactly the kind of thing you'd expect, given modern video tech.
Some of the most prominent bloodlines are said to include the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, various wealthy European families, and established families of the eastern United States, and the British royal family.
This just in, people don't like and are suspicious of old wealth families, and are willing to believe weird things about them if it confirms their biases against them. That's all this is. This group is widely disliked, so Icke can make up nonsense about them and people will buy it.
In fact, he said in numerous interviews that he saw former British Prime Minister Ted Heath's eyes turn entirely jet black while the two men waited for a Sky News interview in 1989.
But he also said he was the son of God and that turquoise opened you up to God energy. David Icke isn't exactly someone whose personal testimony should carry lots of weight.
Ultimately, the global elite make up the top of the pyramid for the reptilians in modern day. all with the intention to keep us sedated and trapped in this reality without gaining a higher knowledge.
Or maybe they're just self-interested and out of touch with a dash of amorality. Really, is that not enough to explain their behavior on the world stage? Why do we need to add to this perfectly ordinary and sufficient explanation that they're also extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, psychic, but also physical brain vampires who also happen to look like ordinary people, except once in a while when digital cameras are on them? It's like Jordan and Ike looked at Occam's razor and thought, nah, what if we do just needlessly multiply entities? Sounds more fun.
At the top of the global elite are what Ike has referred to as the prison wardens, who oversee us in what is, to them, just a prison world. Along with the New World Order, their main goal is apparently to create a microchipped population, a one-world government, and a global Orwellian fascist state, a brave new world, which he claims will be a post-truth era where freedom of speech is denied.
Well, they're doing a really poor job. The world is not noticeably closer to having a single government than at any point in the last 100 years or so. And haven't these advanced aliens supposedly been here from the Bronze Age? You'd think that if they'd wanted a one-world government of oppression, they'd have done it back when most governments were pretty oppressive and no one had the technology to even spread information, never mind resist. Plus, weren't they thought of as gods at the time, not just rich bankers? See, none of this makes sense even on its own terms.
And how are they planning to do this, you might ask? Well, if Ike is to be believed,
which he's not, but I'm gonna let you finish,
then the Brotherhood either created or controls everything. Things like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, Round Table, the Council on Foreign Relations, Chatham House, the Club of Rome, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderberg Group, as well as the media, military, CIA, MI6, Mossad, scientific publications, most religious doctrine, and even the internet.
So they already control everything, but they haven't bothered to actually act on their alleged goal. Man, these must be the most incompetent reptoid alien demon overlord bankers imaginable. Why do people still live under separate sovereign states, have robust freedom of speech protections? Oh, maybe it's because the whole idea is stupid and self-contradictory.
In other words, they control every aspect of our society and can make us believe what they want, when they want.
And presumably, they don't want to be found out, so they, with their absolute control over everything, make us not believe in them. Well, except Jordan and David Icke, who have somehow overcome the complete control the reptoids have over them, and they are, for some reason, allowed to spread the truth to the masses, who again are controlled by the reptoids. I wonder if Jordan sees how all this falls apart on even the barest application of any thought whatsoever. This is just bad world building. If this were a sci-fi story, I'd throw it in the trash and complain to the publisher about their vetting process for what gets published.
Before we move on, I think it's important that we now revisit Bob Dean and a particularly interesting story that he shared during the European Exopolitics Summit in 2009. He described that he was attending his son's retirement ceremony from the US Navy in Washington, D.C., and at this event, there were a great deal of active and retired generals, admirals, captains, and more.
That literally sounds like one of my nightmares, but that's neither here nor there.
One particular retired Navy scientist approached him and said, "Hey, I know you. You're that retired command sergeant major who has opened up about the UFOs. I have a story for you. That my last government job was as a plasma fusion physicist at a top secret place outside of Las Vegas."
So far, that's not entirely unbelievable. Fusion research does focus on plasma, and there's no reason that it couldn't be done outside Vegas, as that's a location for more than one secret research base for the US military.
And I was working there for 5 years with 2 guys who were not from here.
Like, they're Japanese? Sure, I don't see why not.
They were from somewhere else. Delightful people supporting us in figuring out plasma fusion, which equates to infinite energy forever.
No.
Fusion would be much more efficient than our current energy sources, if we could get it to work, but you still need to burn through fuel to produce it. There are no infinite energy options. The universe just doesn't work that way. Fusion would be wonderful and pollution-free energy, but it's not going to reverse the entropy of the universe, no matter how nice that might be.
The man said, "After a few years of working with these guys, I approached one of them and asked, okay, what do you really think of us, humans, as a species?
Then I guess they weren't just scientists from, like, Japan or something.
And the alien said, well, since you've asked, we think you are a primitive, savage, and dangerous race.
Yes, I'm sure the complete inability of humanity to get anything on target outside the solar system must be very scary to interdimensional faster-than-light traveling ETs. They must be quaking in their boots. You know, if aliens wear boots. Maybe they only wear Crocs. Who knows?
The other alien who was listening in then leaned in and said, and you also smell bad. And he explained that it's not really about our bodies, although yes, we have polluted our bodies and the earth to a wild extent, but that we also have a psychic odor about us. Our thoughts and feelings are so negative that other higher species find it terribly offensive.
So according to some guy who isn't credible, some other guy said that aliens think that humans are the smelly, mean kids in class. I mean, okay, I guess. Not sure what I'm supposed to do with secondhand hearsay that probably didn't happen, calling humans stinky poo-poo heads. I guess I'll just ignore it, since who cares what fictional aliens said?
While this story is actually kind of funny, it's also something that we should take very seriously.
I'm going to go ahead and take it about as seriously as I take Alice in Wonderland. In that, no, neither happened, but both stories have morals that aren't bad lessons.
According to the reports and expressions from many whistleblowers, the other species who are interacting with us are actually mostly benevolent, and if we can really listen to what they have to say and do some meaningful self-reflection.
But the reptoids who control literally everything, including the government, just let them work with humans because what? The reptoids are just self-loathing morons, I guess? I mean, if fictional aliens calling you stinky gets you to be a better person, I guess that's good. Personally, I think you should strive to be a good person regardless of aliens who don't like your smell, but who am I to say?
It may just help us to clear out our own negativity, release ourselves from any reptilian or other controlling influences, and put us into a position to meet some really cool otherworldly species.
But the reptoids, according to Jordan, control everything and everyone, so there's no realistic possibility to even learn about their control, never mind escape it. So, again, the whole thing just falls apart on the first little tiny bit of thought that you put into it. But that's it for this video series. I hope you liked it, and remember to like the video on YouTube, comment to tell me what you liked or didn't like, and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon and turn on all notifications so you always know when there's more Dapper Dino content out there. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur.
How